It seems now that Ukraine may be on the verge of absolutely losing all of its aid that it's receiving from the United States in its military contest against Russia. I'm sure many of you saw the interaction that took place between Zelensky and Trump only a day ago, and the vicious squabble that took place between the two of them. It was childish, to say the police, and not to say the least, and not something that should have taken place between two statesmen, between the leaders of two countries, particularly ones that both share the common interest of undermining Russia. But we understand what's going on here. The U.S. is somewhat tired of funneling money into the war against Russia, a war that it's fairly clear Ukraine is not going to win. There've been no significant gains. There've been no significant strategic moves against Russia in a significant period of time. And it's fairly clear that Russia has the advantage but is holding back. And the dynamic of the relationship between the United States and Ukraine should be fairly obvious. The U.S. is propping up Ukraine because it's in their interest to do so, to undermine Russia, which stands as opposed to their interests. Now, Trump recognizes this. He knows this. That's why he's making demands of the resources in the country. Now, these demands were always going to come regardless, whether it was Biden or someone else. They were, however, not going to be to this ridiculous degree. They were probably going to be fairly steep, but not something that was unpalatable to the Ukrainian people. The U.S. is going to have to get something out of all the money that it dumped into Ukraine's defense, but it was not going to be anything like what Trump put forth, something that simply Ukraine could not accept. The problem here is Ukraine really doesn't have a choice. I mean, what are they going to do? Just not take aid from the United States? That would be a complete death sentence to their defense against Russia. The war would be over in what, 6 months? The European allies are tired of sending money over to Ukraine, and they don't even have enough to make up for what the U.S. would be sending. They would not be able to make up for that deficit, even if they wanted to. The U.S., Trump, knows that they have Ukraine by the balls, and Zelensky has to do whatever Trump says, no matter how bad the deal is. And Zelensky, understandably, lost his temper at the incredibly ridiculous deal that was given to him by Trump. And yeah, I get it. I would have blown up too. And that's a fair response. And when confronted with the anger towards the ridiculous deal, Trump said that he was insulted, that the American people had been insulted, that all of it was disrespect. You know, his usual, he can't actually admit that he did anything wrong, and that anything that disagrees with him must be some kind of assault. No one can legitimately just disagree with him, let alone admit that he'd be wrong in any way, shape, or form. People can't actually have a disagreement. Not even just like a simple disagreement, not even a legitimate agreement, any form of disagreement whatsoever. Any disagreement with him whatsoever is some form of assault. It's an attack, which is really funny because I've seen that kind of mentality out of a lot of liberal circles. If you disagree with them on one tiny little issue, you're instantly an evil you're instantly an evil conservative, even though you're actually not. You're just disagreeing with them on one level. Say you don't support a liberal position, but you want something of a more materialist background, something that would be more Marxist, something that would be aiming for the same goal, just doing it a different way. But you're still an evil conservative because you don't want to do it their way. It's interesting how this same phenomenon would appear in Trump as well. The Trumpers don't even notice it. So their own point of pointing out snowflakes appears in Trump just as well. It goes completely over their heads. They don't even notice it. But this could very well spell the beginning of the end for Ukraine's defense against Russia. Because Trump has already made it clear what it is that he wants to do. He wants to win Russia over to their side. Let's face it, there's an East and a West battle going on here. Two main collections of interest, the United States and many European countries against Russia and China. And they are competing for resources, they're competing for access to markets, etc. Same old capitalism, same old multipolar world that existed in World War I. Everybody forgot to read their Lenin on that. Instead of cheering on a multipolar world, they should have read their Lenin and realized that this isn't necessarily a good thing. So you have the two great sides, even with them, with contradictions between them. Within the same size, there's two massive polar sides: the U.S. with some European countries, China primarily with Russia, and Russia is allied to China because, well, the U.S. has been dumping all over Russia, sanctioning them, blowing up the Nord Stream 2 and then blaming them for it, trying to put NATO within Ukraine, sparking off this entire conflict to begin with. So, recognizing the amount of cooperation that exists between Russia and China, Trump wants to win Russia back over to the U.S. side and make essentially Russia like a client state, like an ally, like a junior partner to the United States, a junior partner of U.S. imperialism, the way Canada is a junior partner of U.S. imperialism, or the U.K., or many other European states. The problem is, it's too little too late. That's just not going to happen. The ties between China and Russia are just too well developed. The economic ties between the country are numerous. Not to mention, not just, regular everyday trade, but, trade in each other's currencies, a way of getting around the weaponized US dollar for trade. They have military agreements, military pacts that they exercise at least once every couple months to some degree or another. And what are they to do with these agreements if all of a sudden they decided to start joining the U.S.? And even on a more in-depth level, China has Russia as a very close ally, not as some kind of junior partner, some kind of, for lack of a better term, bitch. Russia has a very dignified and respected position within the pecking order of China's power structure. It stands well above everyone else and is considered to have a significant amount of autonomy and significant amount of decision-making power. None of this it would receive as a client of the United States. It would be wholly subservient. It would be obedient the way many of these Western European countries are. I mean, some Eastern European, but probably not so much for much longer. I mean, they basically answer to the United States without question. And something that is starting to be questioned now that Trump is starting to be so unreasonable about it, now that Trump is starting to attack allies. Let's face it, Russia would have second, if not third class status. Remember, the US would always be first. And even if Russia is second, it would be a very, very distant second. The US does not allow anyone to come anywhere close to its power. It is to remain completely and wholly unrivaled in its spheres of influence. Its allies are never to come anywhere close to it. Nothing that would ever be able to challenge it. So this is not all that great of a deal for Russia. It's a deal. It's better than no deal. It's better than being on its own. But it sure as hell ain't better than being allied to China. Russia would have to be insane to take the deal to join the United States over Russia. Geopolitically, it makes no sense. It's not suicidal. It's just not preferable. It would be silly. And in the end, that's what this is about. This is about geopolitical maneuvering. This is very far from the oversimplistic view that many people have, that the way that the media presents it, Putin bad. He's evil. He's just greedy. That's why he does what he does. He invaded Ukraine because he's bad. He's just greedy and wants what's there. And then he'll invade the rest of Europe. I mean, it's nonsense to suggest that Putin is going to invade the rest of Europe. There's no significant reason to suggest that. There's no significant reason to do it. The invasion of Ukraine is fairly clear because they were trying to make it a NATO member after previously promising to never make Ukraine a NATO member. The US and Ukraine essentially forced Russia's hand in order to do this. If Russia did not respond, it was going to be placed in a weakened position. It had to do it. This is far from, oh, Putin is just bad, so we did it. This was geopolitical maneuvering by the United States. They did not believe that Russia would actually invade. They thought they were going to actually have another NATO country right on the border with Russia to help surround it. And NATO being a force that is used to militarily counter Russia, to threaten Russia. All of this is geopolitics. This is not like simplistic, pablum meant for children, the way the media is presenting it. This person bad, this person evil, etc. And don't get me wrong. I mean, the same thing is done on the other side. I mean, I've watched Russian media. The U.S. is just bad. The globalists, it's part of a conspiracy. I know the Western side is bad for just saying Putin evil, making it simple. But the other way around is just as bad, with conspiracy theory nonsense, with the globalists and their plot against Christians, their plot to make everybody gay and trans, and their plots to do this and that and force everybody to be part of a one world government. And remember, the NWO conspiracy does not die when Alex Jones is off the air. You know, even though he's not really off the air, he's still on the air in a reduced capacity. The idea of the New World Order as a conspiracy never really dies. But that's what the far right is pushing. This conspiracy theory about globalists and a big plot to make everybody think a certain way and make everybody be gay and trans. And it's all a conspiracy to get rid of Christianity and Christianity's persecution complex, as it has been one of the most persecutory religions in history. And there is no such thing. There is no globalists. There is no conspiracy. It's just geopolitical maneuvering by the United States. But that's not what's fed to the people who are anti-US and anti-Western Europe or anti-US spheres of influence. They're fed this conspiracy, not directly, but they push it along those lines, frequently avoiding using the word globalist, but they're pushing that idea, just not using the actual word. It's interesting to note that the word globalists, if I'm correct, and I think I am, started with Alex Jones to essentially refer to some kind of nebulous group of people that are not necessarily government, but rather above the government, that belong to no country, that are just sort of there and then have no nationality, just a secret cabal of rich people like Bill Gates. Bill Gates out to make us all sterile and do all kinds of evil things with vaccines, to do all this damage because you know he's just evil. Another ridiculous oversimplification. Bill Gates has done nothing trying to be evil. Bill Gates has only done neoliberalism. He has only ever done what people in his position has ever done. All of his philanthropy has been to save capitalism. All of it has been to try to put a happy face on capitalism, to make it more stable. Vaccines in Africa, in order to make life more sustainable, so that you can have more people to engage in labor. Because sick people don't engage in labor. Increasing living standards, because the market doesn't actually do it. Try to dig wells and get people connected to the world market, build roads so that we can get things interconnected, because God knows if you don't do it, China is going to do it. If you don't build roads and interconnect the economy, the Belt and Road Initiative is going to do it, and China is going to dominate it and control it. So you better get on it. But it's only evil when Bill Gates does it, because globalists. So the point is always to break free of this simple-minded narrative that's always being pushed by both sides. They're both guilty of it, because they're both the mainstream media. The mainstream media here is as to be distrusted as the mainstream media there. And the reason is because they are both protecting a capitalist elite. They're both protecting the bourgeoisie. Two different groups of bourgeoisie in a very big contradiction. a geopolitical contradiction. And that's what people aren't seeing. And that's what a lot of people who claim to be Marxists aren't seeing. They're not seeing that the media are both unworthy of trust. That just because RT goes out and tells you something that is going on in the U.S. that the U.S. isn't telling you, doesn't mean RT is trustworthy. It doesn't mean that they don't lie to you. It doesn't mean that they don't push a false narrative in order to prop up the rich inside of Russia. If they didn't, they wouldn't be doing their job and they'd have no point. That had always been the great thing about RT, and the one thing that made them the most watched on YouTube, the one thing that had made them so dangerous they had to be banned, was that RT in its glory days didn't have to lie. They only had to tell you what the mainstream media in the West wasn't telling you. They only had to tell you the truth. There was no need to lie. But then the day came where that wasn't enough. They had to start pushing the bourgeois narrative of Russia. People like to cry, no, they're pushing Kremlin propaganda. Again, an oversimplification. That's not exactly how that works. They're pushing the narrative of the bourgeoisie, defending the interests of the bourgeoisie, just as it's done in the West. And you get your different flavors of it, just as you get your MSNBC and you get your Fox News. And no matter what the flavor is, in the end, you still get sick because it's still representing the bourgeoisie. And people should never forget that. The media, no matter how much different it may seem from what we have, in the end, it still serves the same purpose: to prop up the capitalist class, to not fall for the oversimplified narrative that dumbs it down to pablum. Understand its contradictions. Understand what it's really saying. Read between the lines. Understand the competition that takes place in geopolitical maneuvering. Understand the competition that's taking place between various sections of the capitalist class. And only then can you understand the road to undoing capitalism and creating true freedom.
Thank you for watching. If you like this program, then please head over to my Patreon page and set up a monthly donation. It's your donations that keep this program running. Also, if you would like, please rate, comment, subscribe, and share in various social media.